Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Boye, and this is the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. And if you're watching us, this is the video edition. I have a very special guest today. I'm so excited to welcome Julie Michelson. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really excited to get into this interview. Julie is actually a national board certified functional medicine coach. So if you're not sure what functional medicine is and you've heard that, which I think a lot of us have these days, we're going to really unpack what that means. But what I really am excited to share with you is Julie has an extremely powerful story. She overcame a number of different inflammatory diseases, life-threatening issues. And if you look at her now, if you're watching the video, she is healthy, happy, and doing amazing. She's become an expert in helping people to deal with stress, to create stress management routines. She focuses on self-care first, and one of the tenets of her work is gratitude. I cannot think of a better person to have as a guest on this podcast. So Julie, so that we can get to know you a little bit better and you can kind of unpack this story that I introduced, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I, in about 2004, was diagnosed with my first autoimmune condition, which was rheumatoid arthritis. And at the time, I was a newly divorced single mom of 3 kiddos who were 2, 4, and 6. So we were active and busy. And I, went to my Western doc, as one would, and saw the top specialists and was lucky to actually get diagnosed within the first year of seeking a diagnosis. Sometimes with autoimmunity, it can take a really long time. But I also was raised with the good girl syndrome. And so I believed my doctors when they told me that there was nothing I could do to improve my health, to, turn my condition around, but that they would help me through medication, at least try to slow the disease progress. So that was it. I was told, well, we just hope you aren't in too much pain and don't die too quick, was basically. And for 10 years, I stayed in that mindset. I took my meds. I continued to decline. They continued to prescribe more medications. Of course, I needed more medications for the medications I was taking and the problems those were causing. So at the end of that decade, I was on 10 prescriptions. I had couldn't work. I had quit my grad school program because my brain fog was so bad. And I realized also that by that point I was unable to work. So what was the point in finishing a degree? And I literally just saved every ounce of energy I had for my children. That was the focus. And lucky for me, that was about 10 years in when my daughter came to me and said, "Mom, please don't die and leave us." And I knew I couldn't promise I wouldn't. I mean, there was no, at the time I was in my mid 40s, my father had passed in his early 50s. So I didn't think I'd live to see 50. The only thing I could promise her was that I would try everything I could. And there began the shift. Thank goodness.
Yeah. I just want to pause in your story for a moment there because it's that moment of, how old was your daughter at the time when she
was probably like a freshman in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's that, she's basically only known you in this one way, right?
Yeah.
Like she doesn't probably have a lot of memories of you being healthy and well. And that fear of a child to lose their parent, I guess, was the catalyst for you to start looking at making changes. So you're 10 years in, you're in all these prescriptions, you're not getting better, you're getting worse. You have this moment of shift. So what direction did you take at this point?
I started with diet because I had already gone gluten-free a few years beforehand to support my son who was diagnosed with celiac. And
okay.
I now know I too am celiac, but didn't know at the time, but I did notice that my joint pain had improved, just a little bit when I went. So that was the only thing I'd done in years that made a difference. So I dug in with diet further. and continued to identify things in my diet that were driving my inflammation. And everything seemed to help, incrementally. It was a very slow process. And then diet wise, I found, thank goodness, I found Dave Asprey and the Bulletproof Diet. I had been on a low fat diet my entire life. And that was the missing piece for me diet wise, was my poor body was so starved of healthy fats. And so that, that was a leap, not just a little tiny step. And that got me well enough to be able to start to expand. As you mentioned, I love like the self-care and the bringing in a committed meditation practice and learning about gratitude and an actual gratitude practice versus, I think I've always been a grateful human. It's different. So
yeah, there's a difference between just being grateful, as the sign behind me says, and actually practicing gratitude. And it's to me, it's like a yoga practice. It's something you do on a regular basis. You continue to practice it. I don't think there's ever an end to how we can develop the way that we practice gratitude, kind of like with a yoga or a meditation practice. It's something we're doing every day. It's just part of our healthy routine. So it's interesting. I actually just finished reading his book, and I just was so curious that that's what triggered it for you. And the low fat thing. I mean, I grew up in the same time where fat was bad.
yes.
I still work with clients that are scared of fat. It is
Yes.
a very difficult mindset to shift, the understanding that our body needs healthy fats. Our cells, our cell walls like thrive, right? Like they can't, our brain needs healthy fat, all these things that are misunderstood. And it takes a lot. And you mentioned a few times about mindset shift. And that to me is a big thing about healing is, where do we start to shift our mind? And you started where you'd seen a little bit of improvement, which is with your diet. And that does help. I think once we do something small that starts to have a little bit of incremental change, that our mindset is able to shift and we can do more and more and more. And I don't know about you, but I find one of the challenges with my clients is often they want to do too much at once.
Yes.
And then they're overwhelmed and they feel like they're failing.
And they quit.
And they quit.
Yes.
Yeah. And they quit.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I say, look at the target. We know where we want to go, but it's like climbing a mountain. You're not staring at the top of the mountain the whole time.
No,
you know
what?
where you're going, and then you're taking one step at a time. And it's the same with our wellness.
Check your map and your route and make sure you're going the right way and make sure you see the trail markers. And
yes.
Yeah, it's very hard to climb a mountain if you're always looking up at the top, because you'll start slipping and sliding. So
yes.
As we both live near the mountains, and I'm sure it's experience. So now I'm kind of curious. So you went through all these personal challenges. Were you already studying functional medicine like before you gave up? No, this is all new. So how did that come about?
So through Bulletproof, actually, about a year into my Bulletproof journey, they created a coaching program. And my brain was well enough, and I was like, I want to help people. This has been remarkable. I want to help people. Prior to that, I was studying equine assisted psychotherapy. So I've always wanted to be in the helping profession somehow. And so I did their coaching program, and that's where I really learned. I had heard, like most, the term functional medicine, but it was through that coaching program that I learned that was the next step for me in my healing journey. And so my career has evolved as my healing journey has evolved. I became passionate about not only coaching as a way to help people, but the more I learned about functional medicine and went back to school to learn as much as I could about, all of the approaches and details about that perspective on wellness, to me, it's just a no-brainer, because it works with chronic illness, and that's my story and that's my passion.
Well, and it's something that affects the majority of people today. I mean,
So many
really,
people.
the majority of people that we know in living in North America are dealing with some kind
Yes.
of chronic illness. So
Yes.
if I'm hearing the term functional medicine, and I
Yes.
am hearing this for the first time,
Hmm.
what is the simplest way for you to understand what does this mean?
Functional medicine is what we call root cause medicine. So unlike when I was diagnosed and told, you'd have this and you're done, basically, um, the functional medicine approach, looks at the whole body as opposed to Western medicine, which is system by system, right? You've got a specialist for each organ, and but also the approach that the body can heal itself. So taking autoimmunity, for instance, there's a saying in functional medicine, genetics loads the gun, but environment pulls the trigger,
Yeah.
right? And so so for me, like rheumatoid arthritis was my first diagnosis. They don't look at me and say, well, you have rheumatoid arthritis, there's nothing we can do. They say, what caused that?
Right.
Genetics or not. And actually I don't have the genetics. So what caused it? And when you get to that root cause and you address the root cause, the body can heal. And it does.
It does.
Over and over and over. It works.
And the root cause in so many situations is stress and inflammation.
Yes. It's all chronic inflammation. It's a question of what's driving the inflammation. And it's not usually one thing.
No.
And so almost always, I have yet to actually have a client show up on my doorstep with their stress management really dialed in. I haven't found it yet.
So, and this is something that you become an expert in. And this is, I think, what a lot of our listeners will want to learn more about. So we spoke a little bit before we started recording, and you were telling me about a stress management routine. And I have to be honest with you, I'd never really thought about it in that way. What is my stress management routine? I know the things that I'm doing for self-care and self-love. I've really been working on it. That's actually where this podcast came from. It was a 30 days of self-love challenge, but I never really thought about it in this way. So this is something you coach on and you teach on. Can you explain what that looks like?
Sure, absolutely. And to me, there's an overlap. Like self-care is stress management.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So you may be like looking at it through a different perspective, but you're doing the thing. I already know you're doing the things because we chatted. But the key is the word routine. And I know you and I share that approach of, you do these things when life is good, you do these things daily so that when the stress is elevated, it's a go-to. You're not searching for some like, oh my gosh, I'm so overstressed right now, what can I do? No, it's just right there for you because you've been doing it daily. And so everybody's stress management routine looks different. But I like to work with people. My approach with people is I say I work from two buckets. There's this idea of the scientific tried and true, we know, documented these things reduce cortisol, help reduce stress. And gratitude is at the top of that list. Gratitude, meditation, breathing techniques, time in nature, and there are many more things that work, but these are the documented, scientifically backed, we know they work. And I believe everybody should do at least some of those things, if not all, but at least some of those things as part of their routine. And then the other bucket I love to work with, which also would fall under what you might consider self-care, is I ask people what fills your cup. And that's where it's so individualized. For me, what fills my cup is my horses. I love my horses. For some people, that would be such a stressor if they had to spend time with their 6 horses. That would be a lot. So it becomes really individualized. And so many of us have lost touch with things that have brought us joy throughout our lives. So I'd love to get into like, well, what did you love to do as a kid? And, how do we recreate? It might not be the same activity, but that feeling. And so that blend of the two, making it customizable, but also it's got to be easy to do, or people aren't going to do it.
I do think that finding joy, there's actually, I have all these sticky notes on my desk, and this one says, money follows joy. And because the more I do things that bring me joy, the more my business grows, the revenue grows. Like I'm not fighting it. It's a lot easier. And I love that you separate it into the two buckets, right? You look at the science and the stuff that we already know, but I love
Right.
the other side of it is like, what is bringing you joy? And we are in a time where I don't know where we are in this coronavirus pandemic. We are the end of July 2020. We could be in the middle. We could be at the very beginning.
Yep.
I don't think we're close to the end, but
Nope.
we're definitely in it. And so joy is, I think, is forgotten. I think it's, how do we find joy when like things are really tough? And you mentioned a little bit about going back to our practices and that kind of thing. So you have been through some hard things, even in just this year, Julie. And how have this routine and these practices helped you to get through some of these really big challenges that you've been faced with?
That's a great question. It has been quite a year for me. And as for most of us, but I'll give you the brief snippet. I sustained a serious head injury in January that took me out for about 3 months, and was very scary. But through these practices, literally from day one, and because of what I do and that I love what I do, again, it's the lens you're looking through. It was like, this is going to benefit my clients. I know it is. So it was like, how does this make me a better coach? What can I learn from this that's going to help other people? And I already have a daily gratitude journaling practice. So I also study quantum physics. For the past 3 years, I've been studying with a grandmaster of an ancient Chinese energy program, which is all based on quantum physics. And where you put your attention is what you're calling in, right? I mean, that's just how physics works. So this idea of gratitude journaling, you're telling the universe, I want more of this. Like, yes, please. And B, really pretty quickly for sure with myself, but I see it over and over with my clients as well. The more you start to focus on what you're grateful for, the more you start to notice all of the other things you're grateful for. And so even in a really hard time, you're not in that only seeing the challenge, you're seeing the opportunity in the challenge.
And you spent 10 years only in the challenge.
Yes.
Right. And that's what you said about like, as coaches, when we go through difficult things, part of us is always thinking, well, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to grow from this, and my clients are going to benefit. Because I definitely do the same thing. We've had some big challenges that I'm have not yet talked about, and I'm not ready to talk about just yet, but we've been through a lot as well during this time. And, we talk about the work and the healing. And what I realized, I had this little light bulb moment this week, because I have one of my mentors and peers, she sustained a minor head injury about 3 weeks ago now. So she said, no, I'm doing my work, right? Like you, she's very tapped into the quantum field. She does energy healing, body code. So she's like, I'm over here doing my work, like literally doing the work. And I, the other day, was feeling a bit anxious. And what did I do? I got in the car and I drove to the beach by myself. I went to the beach and I walked along the beach and I sat and I just listened to the water. And I took my photos because that brings me joy. And I just had this moment of, this is the work. And to me, what I think is so critical to just grab of all the little beautiful things you've shared is that the caring for yourself, the doing the things, the addressing the buckets is the work.
Yes. One of my favorite things to say is self-care is not selfish. I mean, it is the greatest gift you can give to your family, your friends, anybody who you interact with, really. That's what it's about. I think that's why we're here, is to become the best we can be. And that takes the work.
It is. And the work is you first, like myself first. And
Yes.
in this time of increased stress and inflammation, and yeah, I'm not eating as healthy as I used to. I've definitely changed some of my habits. Especially at the beginning when we were, just grocery shopping once every 2 weeks, like all these things. So I know that some of the ways that I nourish myself aren't the same as I would before. So even more work needs to be done on taking care of myself and me, and having that stress management routine you talked about. I really encourage people to listen, that are listening right now, to just take a moment and just even write it down, right? You've given us so many good ideas. Write down, maybe what am I already doing? Maybe we don't even know, right? What
Right.
we're doing.
And I love starting there. So many of us are doing the things, but we're not doing them with intention or consistency. So if
Yes.
you're already doing something, start there and just make it daily.
That's a really good point, is that sometimes we get upset with ourselves because we started our gratitude journal and we only wrote in it for 3 nights and then we forgot about it. I just say, don't worry about it. My kid is the
Yeah.
best at this. She's 9. She's had a gratitude practice since she was 5. And you know what?
Shocking.
Sometimes I know, it's like, it's the best. She has this one gratitude journal. It's like this thick and she's been writing in it for almost 3 years.
Aw.
But she misses a night or two. It doesn't matter. She writes most nights, but sometimes she'll be like, oh, I missed like 2 nights. I'm like, oh, well,
Right.
just
The
go
world's
write
not
it.
going to
Let's
stop.
write tonight, right?
Yeah.
Let's teach at a young age. It's okay. You're not failing. You're just human.
Yeah, it is not about perfection. And honestly, I even cringed on the inside when I said, take whatever you're doing and do it every day, because when I'm working with clients and we're going toward every day, if that's the grand goal, I always say, and everybody has a different answer, but okay, if 7 is the goal, like where's the gold star? Can't be 7. It has to be less than 7.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
about perfection.
So you actually reminded me of a really cool thing that I discovered. I didn't make this up, and I read it in Success Magazine years ago. Loved that magazine. So good. It's something called a When Life Works list. WLWL. Have you heard of this before?
I have not. I'm intrigued.
It's very cool because it actually aligns with what you're saying about the 2 buckets. So what you do on this list is you write 10 to 12 things that bring you joy, that you enjoy doing, that make you feel good. So for me, it's like walking on the beach, watching the sunrise, cuddling with my kid or my dog, drinking water, eating foods that nourish me. And so you write this list of 10 to 12 things and you post it in your home, wherever is convenient. Mine's in the bathroom. And then your goal daily is to hit 3 to 5 of those things,
Love that. I
right?
love
It's
that.
not about 12.
Right.
It,
Right. And the key is making the list. Sadly, most adults that I work with can't answer me the first time I say, what brings you joy? And that's, as we talked about chronic illness being everywhere, that it's a big part of the problem. We lose pieces of our joy as we get older, and I mean, my children are my joy, but when all of my attention, nobody told me self-care was not selfish if you're a mommy.
yeah.
um and it's not just women, it's men as well. I've had this conversation so many times in the past week with people that feel stuck, and that's where we start, is okay, let's figure it out. There is you do experience joy, and you will experience joy. Let's find it. Let's create it.
Julie, I agree. We all have there's joy. I mean, why else would you be here if we weren't? Like, to me,
Right.
it's like, if we're not here to find joy in the day and find even a slice, a little itty bitty bit, and maybe your joy is reading that trashy magazine that you don't want anybody else to know about, but you freaking love it, right? Like it doesn't matter. And yes, your joy can be being with your horses or your pets or your animals, but it can also be totally frivolous because joy does not, there's no judgment around joy, right? It just is. It's just a feeling.
Absolutely. And it's contagious. So
Yes.
if you're creating joy in your world, you're giving joy to other people.
Yeah, we need more joy. So good. Okay, as I wrap things up, I love to ask, you have had this incredible journey of real transformation, of creating these beautiful practices. Tell me a little bit about what Julie's day looks like. So where do these practices, these gratitude practices kind of fit into your day? Maybe not every day, but what are the things that you do that are gratitude practices? Just for you.
Yep, just for me. So the first 90 minutes of my day is mine every day. And that's grown. Obviously, it didn't start at 90 minutes. And so that's my me time. I mentioned the energy program that I study. It's called Energy for Success. And that incorporates journaling. So wins and gratitudes. And so that's my gratitude journaling, goals. So I'm journaling goals and intentions every day, every morning, and I'm always doing it. I don't only do it in that 90-minute window, but that's my protected. What I have learned is if I don't, and I think I'll do it later, I probably won't. I meditate in that window, depending on, and then I have a good amount of physical practices through my energy study that I do. So I'm I'm not either, and exercising, perhaps there's yoga. It may look different. But I try to stay pretty sequestered in the, uninterrupted. I don't turn my phone off airplane mode yet. That's my me time. And I do the gratitude journaling every morning. I often do it at night also, not every night. So, if not, then in the morning I'm thinking about yesterday. And I tell people it doesn't have to be, if you're in a tough place, it could be, I'm able to hold the pen today.
Yeah.
I usually start with like, well, what is working on my body, right? And as I mentioned before, it just gets the ball rolling. And so when if I'm being really good and I have the opportunity as I move through my day, when I have that thought of like, ooh, I'm so glad this happened. I got to experience that. I will journal it in my journal. My journal comes with me everywhere. Here's my gratitude journal. It's its own separate journal. So it is so different than just being a grateful person. It really is.
I love too that you said, it's interesting because mine kind of is opposite. So every night that happens, that no matter what. And then my morning practice started a year ago. Like my morning, I had another, like I still have a simple just mantra that I say when I wake up in the morning, which is thank you for this gift of another day and the opportunity to be of service to others and make a difference in the world. That's my mantra.
Love it.
So that's what I recommend to people. I'm like, just start with that. But I started this new morning gratitude practice, which is writing a note in my phone. So I'm still in airplane mode. And then I send it to a friend. And she and I have been doing this practice for over a year. She has kind of fallen off answering me back. It's interesting, but I still do it because it really isn't about her. Like I'm doing it for me, right? But that one I miss a few times. But the night one for me is like, it is so ingrained. I'd love to share a teeny little story because you said about gratitude to hold the pen. And years ago, I experienced a traumatic miscarriage, which ended up with an invasive group A strep, which is a life-threatening bacterial infection. And I spent a week in a medically induced coma. I brought my gratitude journal to the hospital with me when I went to the hospital because it goes everywhere with me. And I remember when I woke up, and really when you come out of that, your body doesn't work properly at all. And I remember just trying to hold a pen. And I couldn't hold a pen. I couldn't speak because I'd been intubated. and I couldn't hold a pen. And I remember like it was yesterday, the page in my gratitude journal, because it was right beside my bed and someone put it in front of me and gave me a pen to hold. And there's a scribble because I was trying to write something and I couldn't. So when you say maybe you're just grateful you can hold the pen, yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm imagining that you might have also experienced that through your life when with rheumatoid arthritis, not being able to even hold a pen. But I when you said that, I had this moment of totally, you brought me back to that moment when I really couldn't hold a pen. So
I have goosebumps. I too have journals, and I keep all of my journals. I mean, there's a powerful place where they all sit. And I have journals so where you can't read what I wrote for various reasons. One, the most recent being, well, that maybe not the most recent, probably if we look at January, you might not be able to read it. It certainly doesn't look like my handwriting if you can read it, but also 3 years ago, I broke my right shoulder and I'm right-handed. But it didn't stop me. So there's a connection to the brain with moving your hand. Yeah. Which is why, you know, I have clients that say, well, I say my gratitudes in my head when I go to sleep every night. And I said, great. And let's make this new practice. So, you know, I know for sure, you know, 3 years ago, September, you could not read what I wrote. And I too I was at the hospital last week. I had surgery and my journals came with me. And, you know, it was as soon as my brain was clear enough to start writing, there I was.
I think this is a great thing to kind of wrap our interview up on, is that both of us have had difficult times. And the one thing that we've carried with us has been the gratitude journal. And that's the point, is that we're looking for the glimmer of gratitude, even when things seem really, really difficult. And that to me is the biggest magic of gratitude. So I've adored our time together. I could definitely talk with you about gratitude for hours and hours.
Likewise.
In the interest of time though, and I really want people to be able to connect with you. So Julie, where is the best place to find you?
The best place is probably my website, which is juliemichelson.com, and there's no A in Michelson. I say it's spelled wrong. And you can, I love connecting with people and finding out how I can support people. You can book a 30-minute call right on the website, a complimentary call, so we can meet and I can see how I can add some value.
Cool. And if we want to follow you on socials?
I'm Julie.Michelson on Instagram and Julie Michelson Coaching on Facebook.
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, Julie Michelson.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure we've got all those links there. This interview will be shared in all those places and I'll be tagging you. I'm definitely going to listen again. I think that's one of my favorite things, is to go back and listen and watch a second time, because I can't take notes while I'm doing my own interview, but you really, I love so many things that you shared. And, you know, we were virtual strangers 45 minutes ago. And if I can feel totally connected with you in the short time we spent together, I know that our audience will do the same. So thank you again, Julie, for being just being you, being authentic, and sharing all the wonderful things and ways that gratitude has made an impact in your life.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing. You're spreading the word.
Thanks, friend.